I'm so glad you could join us for the Public Square now. I'm Wayne Shepherd here with a team which consists of Dave Zanotti, Rob Walgate, Jeff Sanders, and Alan C. Duncan, our producer, all comfortably seated at the microphone here today. And we're going to take the long view on Iran. Boy, what a story we've been following the last week or so here, huh, Dave?
It's interesting, Wayne, because there's so many audio products and programs now in the marketplace, and people are listening more. We've been doing some study about the realm of radio and the realm of podcasting and all the other things that are out there. And it's not that people are listening less, it's that they're listening differently. And I'm mindful of conversations, Wayne, you and I had probably 20 years ago, almost 20 years ago, where these conversations were coming up. And some people thought, well, this means that the future of radio, so to speak, is gone. Mm-hmm. Well, we've gone back and we've studied radio, going back to 1928 and before, and where radio came from and how it's been. Radio is in the DNA of the Western world, particularly in the United States of America. In my opinion, what actually is about to happen, and my opinion is as good as anybody else's, I recognize that, but I believe that the word radio is about to become a word that has far more meaning than it ever has had before.
Interesting.
And around here, when we're talking about radio, we're talking about all of the audio communication products that we feel led to bring to the marketplace. There are different audiences. Mm-hmm. There are different demands. There are different ways that we go about this. And we just got done with a multi-hour meeting talking about what we're seeing coming in the future and where we want to go. And it's exciting. It's scary. I can't say it's dangerous, but there is a fear of failure because we don't have millions and millions of dollars behind us to go ahead and mess it up and start over and mess it up and start over. We can't buy our way in. We've got to earn our way in. And since we're an organization that I would suggest has been on a wilderness journey for the last 45 years, we're kind of okay with that. We've had a chance to stay some nice hotels in our lifetime, but we've never gotten used to the penthouse. All right, and nor have we stopped. I've slept in my car, and sometimes I've slept in hotel lobbies. Okay, all right, on this journey. Okay, so we've kind of been there. So we're still working it out. So today we want to take an approach to talk about Iran from a long view perspective, but we want to establish our credibility first. It's not just because we have radio shows and we have podcasts and because we have voices and we have cameras and we have some level of distribution. That's not good enough. What we bring to the table today is an accumulation of ideas that we've all learned through studying and listening and trying to pay attention. So we're going to talk about the long view of Iran, but we're going to go backwards. We're going to go back about 4,000 years and start with a name that people might still remember. The name originally was Abram. And then I think he may have become the first human in Bible history who was known solely by their first name. Adam, at least Adam is Adam and Eve. Right? Yeah. But the artist formerly known as Abraham is going to be the focus of our conversation today. But as a matter of disclaimer, I have to admit that the accumulation of all of us in regards to experience. Now, we have a deep amount of experience in study, but we have a deficit here that I think needs to be disclaimed right from the start. I wrote my first paper on Zionism in Israel in regards to geopolitics 50 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Right? Is Zionism racism? That was the paper that I wrote.
Jeez.
It's the first one 50 years ago. So what? That was 50 years ago. Now, of course, it's been an interest for all of us our whole lives. But in the midst of the room today, we have 2 days on the ground in Israel. So that leaves us at a point of deficit because there are people who are living there right now who see things we don't see. Mm. People who've spent lifetimes ministering there in person that we don't see and we can't know. So we acknowledge the fact that this is going to be a classroom conversation that I believe actually works on the ground. But we have a weakness in our armor. We don't have. Now, what we really need is a guest who spent their whole life in Israel to be in here with us today. And the news broke so fast we don't have time to get one. Mm. But we still feel that the valid view on this is to look at the long view. So we're going to go back 4,000 years. The name of Abraham we'll start with Dr. Jeff Sanders, who probably has at least a Hebrew and a Greek and some other Bible perhaps in his lap right now. All right, who is this guy Abraham?
Well, his name was Avram, and it means father of people. Abba means father, and Am in Hebrew means people. And he begins as a pagan, coming from the land of Ur of the Chaldees, which is in modern-day Iraq, between the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. And we have found, archaeologists in the 20th century have found the city of Ur, which means light, by the way, in Hebrew. It's interesting. He comes from the city of light.
Okay, that made the whole show worth it right there.
But, well,
that's really interesting.
But
the father men I knew, but I forgot that Ur means light.
When God says, let there be light in Hebrew, Wayahi Ur, and so let there be light. But
what's the word for strength in Hebrew, by the way, or might?
To be strong is chazak.
Okay. And power or strength is? Oz.
Uz. Yeah.
Yes.
So,
we
so Job comes from,
Yeah.
Job's from the land of Uz, from the land of strength. Yeah. So
because I always wonder where the Wizard of Oz came from. Yeah. And there's Oz, that's a Hebrew word.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of...
and Ur is light. Abraham comes from the city of light.
Ur, yeah, and so we've actually discovered the city of Ur, archaeologists. So he comes from there. He is a pagan. He believes in many gods. The Bible tells us this. And then God appears to him in Genesis chapter 12. Or actually in chapter 11, and says, get up, he says in chapter 11, get up from the land of Ur and go to Haran, which is in like southern Turkey, modern day Turkey today. So he leaves and he goes north up into Haran. And then he comes down into a land that I will show thee, God says. He says, follow me and I'll show you this land. And it's the land of Canaan. Today we call it the land of Israel. Just for clarification, it is never in the entire Bible called the land of Palestine. Mm-hmm. That was a Roman designation millennia later, about the year 150, the Roman Emperor Hadrian changed it to the land of Palestine, which is the Latin way of saying Philistines. And he did that despite the Jewish people to try to rename it to kick them out of the land. Well,
the confusion that people might come to if they flip to the back of their Bible, the map might say Palestine on the map in their Bible, but the map is not part of God's divine revelation necessarily.
Very bad and non-historical nomenclature going on there. But anyway.
Okay, that's the second reason I'm really glad I listened to the radio today. There's another fact that I don't think very many people know, that Palestine, it was a Roman naming.
Long after Jesus.
But the motivation for it was interesting.
Yeah, well, to spite the Jewish people because they were so troublesome there in the land of Israel. The Bible calls it the land of Canaan. It's called the land of promise. It's called the land of Israel. It's called the kingdom of Judah in the early part of the New Testament and so forth. But it's never called Palestine. Anyway, so
back to Abraham.
Yeah, so Abraham's there.
No, wait, he was Abram at this point.
Yeah, it's still Abram, and you can read his story starting in really Genesis 11 and 12. He's given the covenant from God, the Abrahamic covenant. He says, I will make of you a great nation. I will give you a seed, land, and blessing. And then later this land is actually mapped out in succeeding chapters, chapter 15, chapter 16, chapter 17 very specifically, and then it's repeated to Isaac and to Jacob later on. It extends from the Euphrates River. It's very specific, from the Euphrates River. So you go straight north of Israel, and you can hit the headwaters of the Euphrates River. It's in Syria. He says, to the river of Egypt. Now there's some speculation. Is he talking about the Nile River or a wadi, which is a dry riverbed, sometimes with water, in the middle of the Sinai Peninsula? But God says, that is the land that I will give to you and to your descendants forever. And then later, God in the Bible is very specific about which descendants, because Abraham had more than just one descendant. The first son that he had was Ishmael, and that is from the union of Abraham and an Egyptian slave girl. There's a whole story behind that. Her name is Hagar. And God says, I'm going to bless Ishmael, Ishmael grows up to be the father of the Arab people. He says, I'm going to bless him, but the land goes to the son of promise, Isaac, and then through Isaac's descendants, who are today the Jewish people. That is what the Bible says, and that is where a lot of the controversy comes from.
So currently the warring parties, if you will, Israel versus other Arab nations, flow from this story of Abraham.
Yep.
They flow from the same source. They have developed two completely different cultures that have been in competition with each other literally for 4,000 years based on the origins of Abram, now Abraham's children.
Yeah. So Abram, and then God changed his name to Abraham. He changed Abraham's wife, Sarai, which means princess, to Sarah. And so the Hey, which is the letter H in Hebrew, would mean exalted father of a people, or exalted princess for Sarah. And so then God, through Abraham's descendants, the Hebrew people, and he was called Abraham the Hebrew. Hebrew, Ivri in the Hebrew language, means to cross over. So he's the one who crossed over from the land of the Chaldees over into the land of the promised land. So their descendants later went down into Egypt. I'm skipping a lot of information. God brought them out of the land of Egypt under Moses. And then through Moses and of course Joshua, they expelled the inhabitants of Canaan who were not Arabs. There were no Arabs there. You had the Canaanites and various Canaanite tribes. They do not exist any longer. It took a long period of time, but they were displaced and they were wiped out through successive wars, not just from the Israelites, but many, many centuries later, the Romans wiped out the last remaining Canaanites through the Carthaginians.
So, Wayne, the story goes back 4,000 years. It begins with a single family that started in a competition that's still with us today. That's the first point of the long view.
Right. Yeah, and it raises some questions, but I'll hold off and see how the conversation unfolds here today. But I've got more than a few questions for Jeff. So my questions and a whole lot more coming up on this edition of The Public Square. This should be very interesting. You stay with us now.
We will be right back for more on The Public Square.
Back with the team as we take the long view on Iran here today. And maybe this is not where you want to go especially, but I have to ask, at least at the time of this recording, thinking of the recent attack on Iran, I don't believe any Arab nation has condemned the attack.
They have not.
Which can you explain simply what is the difference between a Shia and a Sunni? And what is Iran?
Oh, heavens. Okay, you're asking me? Okay.
Yeah.
I've never been to Iran. I actually want to go to Iran someday. Once this settles down, the Iranian people are the Persian people. They are not Arabs, okay? We got to get that on the table right then and there. The Persians, the Iranians will tell you very clearly and boldly, do not call me an Arab.
Really?
And the Arabs will say the same thing. They've been on cordial, friendly terms because they are in the same Islamic belief system for the most part. But the Arabs and the Persians also don't like each other, or they've had a history of combatives for a long time. Kind of like the Germans and the French, you know, or the Germans and the British, but or the Germans with anybody. Anyway, but Shiite versus Sunni. So most Muslims are Sunni. Okay, that is the greater group, the greater denomination. And the Shiites are a smaller denomination. I'm using kind of Christian terms for this. It would be almost—
You can bridge language here, we get it.
Yeah, it would almost be like Roman Catholicism is vast around the world and Protestantism is quite a bit smaller. Or the Eastern Orthodox are quite a bit smaller. And there is some difference between the two in who had the legitimate spiritual descendant from Muhammad, who was their prophet. The Sunni believe it was a certain person, and I don't want to get all into that, and the Shiites go through somebody else. They also have a few minor differences when it comes to like depictions of the prophet Muhammad. Shiites will actually draw Muhammad, but they'll put a veil over his face and like illuminate it. And Sunnis say, absolutely not, you don't do that.
So where does Iran fit into that dichotomy?
They are Shiite, so it is the smaller group among Muslims. But from my readings, I could be wrong on this, they really did not convert to Shiaism until about 500-600 years ago, till about the 15th century or the 16th century. And I am not an expert on Persian history, but I will tell you that what I have read of Persian history, which goes back to about the 7th century BC, their history is vast. It is amazing. It is incredible stories. They are a noble people. They are a very, very intelligent people and excellent cooking. I will say that much. I've had really good Persian food. Amazing. They are known for hospitality. And in the 20th century, they created their own homegrown constitutional movement. They had no help from the British. Maybe they looked at some stuff from the British or the Americans, but they created their own constitutional movement to have a representative government under the authority of a Shah. Shah means king. And they had a free government. Now, did it look exactly like our own? No. But it was an elected constitutional government. And tragically, it was overthrown in 1953 by the British and the Americans, by the British MI6 and by the American CIA. And it was deposed, that freely elected government, by the Persian people, by the Iranian people. And it was replaced by the king, the Shah of Iran, who was thrown out in 1979 in their revolution, Shah Reza Pahlavi.
Now, we're jumping way into the curse, but that's okay.
Ahead.
But hang on, though, since we're there, and this is significant, and I appreciate you going through that. That was very, very helpful. We've now had Bible history in a 12-minute segment, and we're about to have Persian history in a 12-minute segment. And granted, there's a lot of pieces that are significant here, like the question of which is the more radical of the groups, the Shia or the Sunni, in regards to the Islamic Jihad. But the point, Wayne, I want to jump in on is Jeff points to the change with the deposition of the Shah of Iran, the king. Let's go back to Jimmy Carter. Let's go back to 1976. Let's go back to the embassy. Let's go back to what Western media admits out loud, and they've written in multiple places that they never saw coming, with the Shah of Iran being, in essence, sent into exile. What they didn't see was the rise of radical Islamists taking over in Iran. And that is a huge part of this story when that happened.
Well, the Iranian Revolution in 1979 was an amalgamation of many different groups. It wasn't just the radical Islamic Shiites. You had Iranian or Persian Marxists. I actually knew one. And who was all for the revolution. I remember talking to this guy when it was taking place. You had liberals, people who were very westernized and said, yes, I'm a Muslim, but I believe in a Western-style democracy. All of these people came together. The Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini was in Paris, France. He wasn't even in Iran during the revolution. And they all came together and overthrew the Shah. Shah was very ill and not able to do whatever he wanted to do. And Jimmy Carter said, your time is up, get out of there. And so he left and went into exile in Egypt. And through many months and years, the radical Shiite Muslims eventually eliminated all of their that means killed them. The liberal pro-Western democratic forces among the Iranians, and the Marxists who are not pro-democratic, and other groups who are much more moderate.
So it may have started looking like Les Mis, but in the end, it turned into the radical Islamic state that we know today.
Yes.
And it's been that way now for generations.
Yes.
All right. And so this is the current of what we're dealing on right now. Now, so you can already see the multiple streams of history that come together that begin to make this most interesting. Would you say that Iran is... Well, let's talk about the Middle East, just from a geopolitical perspective. There are orders of authority, orders of wealth, orders of doing business, but it seems like the Middle East is always an unsettled place. Mm-hmm. These countries each have their own domains. They share together in culture. Some of them go back to the traditions and even the lineage of Abraham. Mm-hmm. Some do not in that same order. So some consider themselves Arabs, some do not.
The Turks are newcomers,
right? And Turkey's been
on
and off.
They've only been around for like 1,000 years,
And Turkey's been on and off the map, pretty free. Yeah. And that's another thing is the map names change also over history quite a bit. Mm-hmm. So you've got would it be safe to say that the one thing that seems to galvanize the area, and there are many things, I'm sure, oil.
Sure.
Sand. I mean, there's a lot of history here. But one thing that seems to galvanize the area is the sentiment that Israel is either not popular or a mortal enemy.
Well, yeah. So it's really strange because several of these Islamic countries, like Persia, Iran, were safe havens for Jews. Mm-hmm. I mean, even under Islamic rule. And the Quran, I've read it all the way through more than once. The Quran says that the Jews and Christians are people of the book, so treat them with respect. Although there are later passages that says, kill them all. And
a lot of this has to do with which of the faith divisions are following the earlier book or the later book.
Or who seems to be the bigger threat of the day.
Right.
But various Christian groups and Jewish colonies living in Persia had safe haven for centuries, although there were times of persecution as well.
But now let's talk from 1948 forward and the creation of the new state of Israel, the modern state of Israel.
So, the Ottoman Turks were displaced by the British during World War I. And so the British took over this area that we call Israel today, and they called it Palestine. How convenient. Or it was called the British Mandate, or Transjordania was another name for that. And the Zionist movement was growing. Now, there has been a continuous Jewish presence in the land of Israel since the Romans, since the days of the ancient Egyptians, or since Moses and Joshua got there. But the British said, we will create a two-state solution here. We will have a place for the Jews, and they can live here, and the Arabs can live here. I'm making a long story very, very short. But in 1948, after World War II, after the world was shocked and horrified by the final solution and the Holocaust of the Jews and so forth, the British finally said, look, we're just going to, cut this in half. The UN said, okay, this area is going to be Jordan and Transjordan, and this small sliver, it looks like someone took paint and threw it against a wall. Some of these areas were not even connected. That will be a land for the Jewish people, and then everything around it is going to be for the Arabs. And in 1948, the day after Israel declared its independence by UN mandate, they went to war.
Right.
And the Jewish people were attacked by, I lost count, at least 6 nations. Mm-hmm. I know Egypt attacked them, Jordan attacked them, Iraq attacked them, Syria attacked them, I think Lebanon, and I might be leaving somebody out, but they were attacked from all sides, and yet they won.
And I hate to have to interrupt, but we need to take a break, and this is fascinating and very helpful as we process even the news today that we're hearing. So you stay with us for more on The Public Square. If you joined us late for this lesson, and it really is a great lesson, you can catch up online or on YouTube. Just look for The Public Square. Online is thepublicsquare.com.
be right back for more on the Public Square. Spreading the light of liberty across the land. Now back to the Public Square.
Well, let's get back into our conversation today, the long view on Iran. And you know, men, as I think about this topic today, and this is kind of an aside, but I think about the fact that I've been told, I can't verify this, but I've been told that Iran is a place of growth for Christianity. There are many Christians in Iran, which is sobering when you think about what's going on now. So I wanted to throw that out there.
Well, we're big fans of Christmas around here. There are many Bible scholars that say the wise men who were present for, I guess, not the baby Jesus, but the early child Jesus may have been Persian themselves. So there's some thought about that. They might be there at the nativity.
Well, it's the second Holy Land. Where does the book of Esther take place? In the capital of Susa of the Persian Empire. It didn't take place in Iraq. It took place in modern-day Iran.
And Daniel, a lot of his life was spent there, the prophet Daniel.
Sure.
So let's bring us now to the modern state of Israel, post-World War II and post the first attack and Israel's first victory and then becoming a nation. We're leaving out a huge amount of political infighting and decision-making and process so that someone who would be taking a side other than Israel listening to this program might be screaming at the radio. We were talking about it in the break because we're leaving big chunks out.
Lots.
All right. And obviously anyone that's deeply, intimately familiar with this would also know that they're seated in a room with people that are very pro-Israel.
Yes.
But it's very important for us to disclaim another thought, and that is not that we're attempting to curry the favor or even beginning to remotely think that any amount of words are going to settle this ancient conflict. Our premise on this is that all people are created in the image of God, all people, and that because someone is an Israeli or a Jew or a Christian or a Muslim, none of those people has any higher standing with God because God sees all people with ultimate standing of worth. He made them. God's not confused about his value and his love for the individual. Sometimes we get confused. He's never confused.
Right.
His love is absolute for all. Now, what we're trying to do is to set this conflict in historical context. The point is, we can turn it right here. We could continue. We had Jeff a war in 1948, and then we had a war in 1964.
One in 1956, too.
56, 64, 73.
60, okay. The 67 Six-Day War, and the 1973 Yom Kippur War, in which Iran, under the Shah of Iran, sold oil to the nation of Israel.
Is that right?
Well, yeah, a lot of people in Iran never forgave him for that.
Wow. So our point is, we go back to the 4,000 years to the ancient tension between Abraham's children and the warring that has gone on into the modern time through World War II. Now there's a new nation, and they have been perpetually at war in the region until just a few days ago, when once again the bombs have been flying in Israel again. And in this case, it's between Israel and Iran. But let's not think for a second that there aren't several other Arab nations that would, if the timing was right, would be happy to join in the fight, because there is a pronounced avocation for the rejection of the right of the Israeli nation to exist in modern history.
Yeah.
All right. That's from the river to the sea.
Yeah.
What does that mean when people are chanting that as they're warring against Israelis?
Most college students wouldn't know either what the river to the sea means, because they've been confronted with that and they have no clue. The river would be the Jordan River, and the sea would be the Mediterranean. Well, everything between that is the modern nation state of Israel. And it is an insult to Islam, which tells its followers that they will dominate. They will have everybody else in subjection. And so the Dar Islam, the House of Islam, if a section of that is rolled back and is inhabited instead by an alien religion, such as the Jewish people,
or the
Christians, like during the Crusades or whatever, then that is an insult to Allah. And so many Muslims, I can't say all, but many believe that the Jewish state must be eradicated. God's honor is at stake, that God's truth is at stake.
So here's the point, and here's the twist. When it comes to the activities of the United States of America, the war that's been going on for 4,000 years is not our war. And I think that's important to note. This is one we didn't start. We didn't cause. Our existence neither depends upon the outcome of that war, nor is it in our agenda to foment that war. This is not America's war. And the people who say that, and I know that usually is coming from a particular ideological point of view. The people that don't want, no more wars and all that. I don't care whether it's Bernie Sanders or Steve Bannon. Right? You can't be any more archetypically separated than those two. No. Are both saying this is not our war. They both happen to be right if the study is based upon historical origins. Not only is it not our war, but America can't solve the problem between Arabs or between Abraham's children. That we are not the solution to that war either.
Well, what's interesting, you had asked me earlier, Rob brought it up during the break, have any of the Arab nations in that area condemned the United States yet? And it's interesting that, to my knowledge, as of this recording, no Arab nation, not Saudi Arabia, not Qatar, not Syria, not Egypt, not Jordan.
Trump was just in a lot of these nations. And there's reporting out that they talked about Iran during these meetings.
Yeah, they actually don't like Iran, and they are very fearful of a nuclear weapon, just like Israel is. They're fine with Israel having nukes, but they don't want Iran to have a nuke because they know that the theology of their leadership is to start the final apocalyptic war.
Okay, so let's then turn now to the American point of view on this. It seems that what we have is from reports from the ground, directly from people who are there, it appears that Iran is not necessarily the most beloved neighbor by anyone in the region.
That's right.
And let's go back to what's in the DNA of the confession of the Iranian Islamic State, which is death to Israel, death to America. This is a part of a mantra. I would almost say if we could call it a prayer, it's more than a theme, and it's certainly bigger than a meme. Everywhere you turn and everywhere their children are told, this is one of the main operational realities of the Iranian Islamic State. Death to Israel, death to the United States. So we have a track record of the death count between Israel and Iran. We have a death count track record between the United States and Iran. Now, simple question from a position of American public policy. If there's a bad actor in the universe, on the globe, that is saying death to you and death to one of your closest allies, and they're moving when they can to make that opportunity real, and there is a body count over a long period of years, going back 50 years.
They've killed a bunch of Americans.
The United States, and going back to the beginning of the nation state of Israel. And this group of people is about to reach the level of having a nuclear weapon.
Which they said they will launch it.
All right. And they were under international guidelines of accountability to report on these things consistently. And someone finally said, you know what? They probably mean what they say, so we have a choice. Mm-hmm. You either make a proactive move to take away that capability, or you let it happen and then respond. Is that or is that not something that American politicians, elected officials, should be concerned about? Is that not a fair question? Now, you look, Alan, like you've got something in addition to that.
Yeah, I want to follow. Yeah, first of all, yes. To answer your question, yes.
Okay.
My question on this is, we'd recently seen Tulsi Gabbard come out and say that they didn't have information that Iran was getting closer than they had previously been to having a nuclear weapon. And a lot of people say they've been saying it Israel's been saying for 35, 40 years. They're 5 months away from having one. They're 5 months. So this time they were? That's
we
the
heard it
question a
all
lot of
before
people are
George
asking.
W. Bush and the weapons of mass destruction,
Sure.
right?
So here we go with
We
that.
heard it
Here
all
we go
before.
again. So I'm
Yes.
very sympathetic to again. I'm
Certainly.
listening, but I'm very sympathetic to people who say this almost sounds like climate change, where
Yep.
we've heard it since
Very
the 70s.
shrewd turn of a phrase. Okay, so the question goes back to WMD and Iraq, and are we being gamed again? And is Tulsi Gabbard a whistleblower? I don't know the answer to that question. I do know that Hillary Clinton is on record that she would, if she was elected president, she would obliterate the Iranian nuclear capacity because she believed it was real. We know that Barack Obama believed it was real. We know that Donald Trump believed it was real in his first term. We know that Joe Biden believed it was real in his term. And now Donald Trump is back, and the question becomes, everyone has said it should have been done all along each of those presidential pathways, and finally Donald Trump did something about it.
We did nothing about North Korea, and look, now they've got it.
Well, I hate to stop the roll here, but we got to take a break, and we'll come back and we'll pick up right here when we come back on the Public Square. You stay with us.
We'll be right back for more on the Public Square.
Okay, we're back with Dave Zanotti, Rob Walgate, Jeff Sanders, and Alan C. Duncan on the Public Square today. And Alan, the point you were making about the enrichment of nuclear material has happened, but some are saying that the actual bomb had not been assembled in Iran. I think that's an interesting point. We'll see how that plays out in the days ahead.
Right, so it's almost people are defining their terms slightly differently.
We may come to a situation where we find out that the information was incorrect. It is. We don't put our trust in any politician.
Oh my gosh! Well, that's part of my problem. I don't trust anybody
Sure.
right now.
Good.
I came out of
Good.
COVID, and all my trust
Yeah,
for politicians
same
is
here.
gone.
And so be it. Now, but the people in power made the decision, and this has been the rationale we've been giving it. And I'm very confident that if, in fact, there's a conspiracy, a whistleblower, a reality that this is not true, it will come out and faster than ever.
Yeah.
Right, faster than ever. I'm convinced of that. But they'll also have to figure out how the Israelis fit into that picture as well, because they're a pretty trusted ally and a pretty trusted source. And the last time I checked, they are not interested in provoking more trouble in their neighborhood. They've got plenty. So if this was a false notion, it would seem to me that it would be certainly against their best interests to blow up stuff that didn't need blown up.
When it's an existential threat to them, to their very lives.
Well,
I mean, yes.
well,
I don't necessarily trust Mossad either, because they can feed us false information so that we can do something that they're not capable of doing, and they may have other reasons for it.
Sure. Well, we've even talked about regime change. Who wants regime change? Who simply wants them to not have nukes?
Hang on. This is the problem. We need 4 hours here. Okay, I got to herd the cats a little bit. I'm sorry, but at least people are hearing that we also have questions, that we are not cheerleading for this administration.
Right.
We're discussing policy as Americans.
Right.
Now, when we talk about Americans, when we talk about Make America First, we talk about George Washington because he's first.
Yeah.
All right, he's first. Always has been. And George Washington warned us against foreign entanglements. And when you're talking about 4,000 years of history, like we said from the start, ultimately, this isn't our fight. It's not our fight unless somebody makes it our fight. There's two ways they can make it our fight. Number one, keep chanting death to America and killing Americans. Okay, that kind of ceases the foreign entanglement reality because it's now our people. Or secondly, attack someone that we have made a decision with the consent of the Senate, the White House, the presidency, and the American electorate is an ally, and that would be Israel.
Be it far from me to disagree with you, Dave, but when George Washington made that statement, oceans separated us from other countries. Today, a bomber can leave Kansas City and fly to Iran and drop a bomb. I mean,
Wayne, he can drop it by a cell phone.
True, yeah, right.
He didn't have to leave anywhere. No, I agree with that completely. It is a different route. But now, I appreciate the disagreement. It's a good point. But the entanglement question doesn't have to do with just the oceans.
And terrorists can
It has to do with alliances as well.
I see.
And
Yes.
we have to be very careful about alliances, even with people whom we love. The point is what Washington was trying to say, among other things, and he was aware of the oceans, is you've got to be careful to not pick up an argument that is not your own. Don't meddle in other people's business. Don't
Understood.
think more highly of yourself than you ought. And I think that's a universal. That's also a biblical principle. So I think we're still on the same page.
Yeah, understood. Yep.
Well, and just to kind of add to this for a moment, I think in some evangelical Christian circles, it's almost an unspoken taboo that you can't even question the modern nation state of Israel. And we know they're an ally, we know they have a right to exist, we know they are besieged on all sides.
They're the freest government in the Middle East. Get it?
So good, but that doesn't mean that every single thing their government
is
does
fascinating.
is good. You'd have to throw
You're
out
right.
80% of the Old Testament if you weren't allowed to criticize Israel.
Okay.
God and his prophets criticizes Israel's behavior a lot, and so does Jesus Christ when he comes on the scene.
Sure does. Look up the USS Liberty incident. I'm just going to leave that right there and tell me that Israel is totally innocent of everything.
Okay, so what we've got here, Wayne, is was back to the old 45 days spinning a tune here and spinning the wax. On a side, you have the geopolitical reality of the American nation in the modern world and how do we avoid entanglements but yet maintain critical alliances. On the flip side, you have the religious argument where some Christians are unable to discern the difference between ancient Israel and modern Israel.
And then there's the album cut.
And then there's the album cut. So
Then there's the live version,
right, and there's a live version.
and the remix.
And some people who think that simply praying for Israel is like a magic wand. Now, that being said, it is also impossible to read the Bible and not see God's love for Israel, even for the land of Israel. Now, God loves the whole earth. It's still his. The earth is the Lord's, the fullness thereof, the people, and all who dwell in it. But look, when we started with Abraham, God made a choice. He called a person. The person responded. And that covenantal relationship, based upon God's choosing to bring out his revelation through a covenantal classroom of people, is near and dear to his heart, and it carries through to the end of the book of Revelation. There is a dynamic biblical element in this that I think we all have to wrestle through to understand. All right, so let's talk about American public policy. So the administration decided, in coordination with I don't know, we could have another argument about.
We don't even have a formal treaty with Israel, but co-belligerent.
Which that people don't know that. I think that's an important thing to say.
We do not have any self-defense treaty with the nation of Israel. I would call them co-belligerents. We are on the same side against a common enemy.
What's our treaty status with Great Britain?
NATO.
Yeah, only through NATO.
Oh, only through NATO.
So there are two countries that, however we define it, we can't escape. One, because our nation is founded upon a Judeo-Christian principle. There is a Jewish museum of the founding era right across the street from Liberty Hall in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
All right? You can't separate Judeo-Christian thought from the American enterprise. All right? It's in our DNA,
Right.
which is a blessing beyond imagination. Because from that, we are not a people who exclusively see ourselves as only that which God loves or prefers, because the God of the Bible loves everybody. God loved both of Abraham's children.
That is true.
All right, and he took care of them both.
Yes.
So the God of the Bible is big enough. And the God of the Bible is ultimately the answer to this conflict. He truly is. All right. Now let's go to American public policy. So this administration, and we could have been having the same conversation if Hillary Clinton was president, because she said she would obliterate the Iranian nuclear potential. So this has been something that could have happened anywhere over the last 20 years, easily. Okay, so now this step has happened. What does it change?
Well, it theoretically, if we accomplish what we set out to do, we set back their nuclear capabilities proliferation for a couple of years, 5 years.
Do we even know that it did set it back? Though?
Well,
We'll find out.
Yeah.
We'll find. And I'm guessing is if it didn't, there'll be another attempt.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, if
We're on a path.
If that government stays in power. Now, the Iranian people, who had every reason not to like us much because we overthrew the government of Mohammad Mossadegh in 1953, who was an elected prime minister in a constitutional government. And because he wanted to nationalize the oil industry, and so British Petroleum wasn't getting a cut anymore, the British and the Americans kicked him out. And it's dirty.
Well, that's the thing. Anytime there's something in this region, you just think
oil. Yeah.
It's oil.
Right. Oil, something like that. Right. Good for Barack Obama, however. I will say a good thing about him, that his administration in 2013 fessed up to all of this and said, yes, we were dirty. We were wrong in overthrowing the Mossadegh government.
Let's take a break, and when we come back, it'll be our final segment of conversation today. What a stimulating conversation, though. You may want to go back and listen all over again. We post this program on YouTube now. Look for the Public Square channel, and online at thepublicsquare.com, and with our smartphone app called The Public Square. Back with you on the Public Square today, and I already know you want to go where I wanted to go, Dave, and that is the whole constitutionality of what's happened with the America attack on the nuclear facility in Iran.
Wayne, I wish that we had more dimensions and layers of experience as a public policy organization. We've only been at it for 45 years. I would pray that God would permit us to be involved another 45 years so we could have people on the ground in different spots in the world, that we could have more experience and have more correspondence and have more people. We're not trying to be bigger than we're supposed to be, but what we recognize is that if you're going to be in the arena of public policy, you have to think outside of simple reason, outside a single state. You have to reach across the nation, but you also have to understand the world in regards to how it relates to the nation that you're serving. So we are an American-based public policy organization. We get that. Our platform is biblical thought manifested through the Declaration and the Constitution. So this is an American enterprise that flows first from a biblical platform of reality. Our field of service is America, and America now obviously it brings up issues all around the world. So we'd like to get better. We have limited perspective. There are people who are listening who are smarter than us on some of these points. But one of the things we've got to turn to now is American public policy and the Constitution. And in that realm, we kind of got a pretty good repertoire. And there's a huge conversation about the constitutionality of the president's action in this regard. We're excited. We are thrilled that the progressive movement in America, and particularly those people in the Congress who are self-defined socialists, are awakening once again to the idea that the Constitution matters. That's exciting. And is that sarcasm? Yes, with a capital S. Because we recognize, being in the arena of public policy, how seldom the Constitution matters until they don't like something that's being done. Then they look for every constitutional thread to pull. Yeah. Okay, we get that. In other words, they condemn the courts until they want the courts and they need them. Okay, that's just American politics. We're trying to stay on platform with the Constitution and answer the question accurately. Article 2 of the United States Constitution has got a couple of pages at best, if it's in a small book. You can put Article 2, the presidency, the executive branch, on one single page of paper. It's just not very big. Article 1 is a lot bigger. And Congress is clearly constitutionally given the responsibility of the conduct of the American military and to declare war. Congress declares war. The president doesn't declare war. Those are two principles. And so in 1973, a War Powers Act was passed out of the frustration of Vietnam, the perpetual police action that was in fact a war, and no one could own up to it. So we had a semantics debate, and we passed, the Congress passed that whole proposal. Now, the irony of that entire proposal is that it has been summarily ignored across every administration since. And it has been constitutionally debated under the War Powers Resolution of whether or not it's real. It didn't really solve the problem except to put one piece of the puzzle in, and that's to force the executive branch to talk to Congress. It doesn't say that they've got to talk to that the executive has to talk to Congress for permission in advance of an action. It says that that in essence the executive can't get away without talking to Congress at all.
So he can just send them a postcard.
Now we're into litigation.
Okay.
All right. The intent obviously wasn't a postcard. But the intent is that the president must communicate with the leadership of Congress in regards to military action. The whole argument, and this is, by the way, there are hundreds of instances in which Congress could have thrown the president into litigation on military action and the War Powers Resolution, which have never happened. There are hundreds of them. They're listed. They're listed in congressional reports. So it's a very sketchy law. It's truly sketchy. And if this Congress is upset that somehow this law was broken, they should immediately pass a resolution to condemn the president. They should pass a resolution to call for litigation. They should instruct the president on what the next steps are, and he can go no further. In other words, Congress is never out of this game. They can do all kinds of things. But it's important to note that there are hundreds of instances of situations like this when the commander-in-chief acted in what he believed were the imminent threats to this country in military action and acted in such a way that it was, some members of Congress didn't like it, but it was never litigated. In other words, to simply say, it's unconstitutional. Based on what? War Powers Act. Excuse me, War Powers Act isn't a part of the Constitution. It's statutory. And it's never been litigated in court.
Supreme Court's never talked about it.
We don't even know if it is constitutional.
Well, and this didn't come as a surprise in the fact that Donald Trump had talked about it, right? With the 60-day window, he said, hey, this needs to happen.
Oh, but come on, Rob, you got the Club of 100 there. They don't want to read it in the newspaper.
I know they don't want to read the newspaper, but you mentioned in a previous segment about whistleblower, the thing's been talked about around D.C. is the fact that this was the most tightly kept secret on the attack. It didn't leak. It didn't get out. And they say that's one of the reasons is because this administration has only brought in people to the inner circle that they trust.
Once again, not playing the role of cheerleader, playing honest reporter in a field where we do have some expertise, and that's constitutional battles. Yeah. And you have a piece of litigation that is not in the Constitution. People are claiming that based on the legislation, that it's not the way it works. The Constitution is really clear on placing the burden of the conduct of the United States military in general in the hands of the Congress. But it also makes the president first responsibility. There's about 9 things the Constitution says the president does. Number 1, commander-in-chief.
Commander-in-chief.
Yeah. And regardless of where you come down on this, you have to tip your hat to the military. What an incredible job of planning and execution.
Wow. I mean, those pilots were in the air for 40 hours, and they had to rendezvous with the KC-130 tankers. Alan, remember when you and I were on a KC-130 and in really a tanker refueling operation over Alabama? We got in the boom, and there was an F-16 fighter that came up. We could see.
Yeah, we were like right there looking over.
We could look right into that pilot's eyes. That was crazy.
Right? Wow.
They had to do that multiple times over the Atlantic and all the way to the target.
Yeah. So we've got just enough time to recap, and that's that we read the news too, and we have contacts all over the world, thanks be to God, and we try to platform this conversation in a way that any American, regardless of their socioeconomic standing, their racial makeup, their their income, their identity proclamations, their religion, whatever, any American, regardless of age, we hope that they can understand the historic surroundings that make these decisions as complicated as they are. And our final point is that the Bible exhorts us, and this is a perfect example why, to pray for those in authority over us. We spend a lot more time worrying than we do praying. We spend a lot more time talking than we do praying. The God of the universe, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God who also cared for Ishmael, is ultimately the answer in all of these issues. War ultimately never works. It never works. Sometimes it's the only option humans have in the fallen world. And it's tragic. But ultimately, war is never the answer.
Well, and to your point, Dave, we also, we'll be praying for what's happening in Iran. We still have a conflict going on in Gaza as well that we're not talking about a lot in light of this now happening. There are lots of women and children and civilians dying there. That's a problem.
This long view says it's not our war, but it is our battle, because it's a battle in the heavenlies. It's a spiritual battle, and we are called to pray.
Well, I appreciate very much this conversation today, guys. Thank you so much. And this may be a good example of one of those programs you've got to go back and listen to again, or maybe you want to recommend it to a friend. Well, it's easy to do when you either go to YouTube and look for The Public Square, or use the publicsquare.com website where you can listen to the audio, or use our smartphone app, a super easy way to listen, and you can subscribe to The Public Square. So check us out, thepublicsquare.com. Thanks for listening, and thanks for your support of the American Policy Roundtable and The Public Square.
The Public Square is a broadcast service of the American Policy Roundtable.